Good afternoon, everyone. This is the Committee of the Whole meeting for Thursday, October the 14th, 2021. We all have us in front of us the agenda. Is there any additions or deletions to the agenda as circulated? I see Councillor Patty Durkee, you have the mic first.
Thank you, Warden Cunningham. I have two additions. One is blue-green algae in Brazil Lake.
All right, so we'll add that as 8.4 under new business, blue-green algae.
And the other is agenda documents.
So 8.5, agenda documents. Thank you. Councillor Sherry Hurlbert, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to add diversity and inclusion, please. Please, thank you.
Diversity and inclusion. And that is 8.6. All right, and I have one agenda item. It will be 8.7, absence of the warden. Is there any more additions or deletions? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended. Moved by Councillor Durkee, seconded by Councillor Nick Hilton. So a motion on the floor to approve the agenda as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried unanimously. All right, any declarations of conflict of interest? I ask you please declare that when that item comes up. Or you can declare some now if you know you're going to have any. Moving on to presentations, we have Communities in Bloom. We have with us today Dave Solos. Thank you very much, Dave, for coming. Could you please turn on your mic, which you did, and I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Warden Cunningham, and thank you, councillors, for inviting me to speak to you about Communities in Bloom. My time is short, so I'm going to speak fast and flip through this presentation as quickly as we can. So I want to give a little bit of background to what Communities in Bloom is all about. Community pride, making the most of what you have. We learned a lot about that with the experience of the town of Yarmouth. It's not helpful if you try to be like some other place, but you need to look at the resources and the wonderful things that you have. It includes community involvement. It's about much more than gardens and flowers. It is almost a mistake to call it Communities in Bloom because people think it's only about gardens, but it's about much more than that. There are different levels of involvement. There's the provincial, national, and international level. It's one of the aims is engagement of citizens, businesses, and municipalities, and a focus on environmental stewardship and enhancing green spaces. The theme is people, plants, and pride blooming together. So a little bit of background. Britain in Bloom and Tidy Towns of Ireland and the Ville de Village Fleurie de France were a model for the Communities in Bloom program in Canada. It was launched in 1995 with 29 participating municipalities that were honored at the first ceremonies on Parliament Hill, and now there are hundreds of communities across Canada and an international challenge. In 2005, the Communities in Bloom Foundation was established, and it was dedicated to funding, developing, and disseminating education and awareness to a wide audience on the value, improvement, importance, and sustainable development of green spaces and natural environment. The program works. If you're starting, you register at the provincial level, and once you complete at that level, you can move on to the national level. The community is evaluated by professionally trained judges. They consider areas of tidiness, environmental action, heritage conservation, urban forestry, turf and ground covers, floral displays, and community involvement. And you see floral displays is really only one category. The communities are, you get a numerical mark, but for the public, you generally are presented with 1 to 5 blooms. Real benefits to the community, especially, this is perhaps the most important, is the written feedback you get in each category. with the exception of community involvement, and that is woven into all of the other categories. There's an increase in community pride and awareness. There's a valuable exchange of information. It's a cost-effective way of having a consultant or a pair of consultants evaluate your community and give you feedback. It's a measure of the quality of life in your community. And if you're looking for places across Canada that might be good places to live, the Communities in Blue program is one of those indicators that this might be a good place. It provides excellent networking opportunities and opportunities for education. So our story in the town of Yarmouth, the Communities in Bloom Foundation started in 2005. In 2006, Councillor Esther Deers established the Communities in Bloom Committee as a committee of town council. That's important. I'll come back to that later if Modi is thinking about going in that direction. Following Esther Deers, we've been chaired by Ken Langell, Sandy Dennis, Wade Cleveland, and currently our chair is Heather Hatfield. So our chair has always been a councillor. Yarmouth enrolled in the provincial category in 2006, hoping to score 3 blooms, and we got 4 blooms our first year. In 2007, we received 5 blooms. In 2008, we won the provincial categories. And one of the judges who visited us that year, I was the person taking them on their tour, and he said, I didn't tell you this when we started, but I was in Yarmouth, working in Yarmouth 40 years ago, when you showed me places I would never have shown anybody. And that essentially was our waterfront. And if you were here in the 60s, you know that it is vastly different now than it was then. In 2009, we entered the national competition and received 4 blooms. 2010, we won the National Award for Heritage Conservation. 2011, we were recognized for having the best residential garden in a small town in Canada, and that was at the Eldridge property right across the driveway from the hospital. In 2012, innovative programs at the Western Branch of the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia were noted. In 2013, we were the winner of the National Environmental Action Award, and the municipality has a lot to do with that one too, because the focus here is on waste reduction, and within Atlantic Canada, the Western region leads the area, and this part of the Western region leads the part that's leading. So they really said we had no choice. It had to go to you. In 2014, we were the national winner in our category. 2015, we won the Butchart Gardens Land Reclamation Award. Again, that had a lot to do with what happened along Water Street. If you remember the area across from Tim Hortons in the 60s, it was a dump, and now it's the Heritage Park. 2016 is blank. It doesn't mean we didn't achieve something. We were recognized that year for some of the changes, again, along Water Street. The Lost to the Sea Memorial, that was a legacy project for the 250th anniversary, got recognized, and one of the judges who had been here prior to that noticed the sign that was there saying future site, and we finally got the thing done. 2017, we got recognition for the 150, the Canada 150 banners along Main Street, and this is us display at the Art Gallery. 2018, we won the award for the National Award for Urban Forestry, and in 2019, we did something that they did not think a small town could do. The National Symposium had never been held in a small town, and it was always in a major urban center, and Yarmouth hosted it, and we got rave reviews. We have a lot to offer people that haven't been here before. A point I'll make is when we were touring some of the visitors around, and we included areas in the municipality and the region in that, we had one of the people from the town that wins everything nationally and internationally, and she was standing on the edge of the water looking out to sea with the sun shining on it. It was this time of year. She thought she was in heaven. It's like a, huh? So we're doing okay. So we've got a lot to celebrate here in our community, and here's just a list. The hosting of National Nova Scotia Music Week, the Play On Street Hockey Tournament, the Special Olympics, the over 55 games, the Mariners story from zeros to heroes, the Shark Scramble, a walking trail with the multiflora roses. If you haven't walked that trail when they're in bloom, you need to do it. Seafest, the satellite gallery of the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia, the only satellite gallery in the province, and we have been fighting to save that, and we have been successful so far. Story of the Ark, Homegrown Theater, the Yarmouth County Museum, which is the winner of the American Society of State and Local History Award. That's not something that's easy to win if you're not an American museum. Lawrence Sweeney Museum, the Sport Heritage Center, Mountain Cemetery. Most people don't know that the person that designed Mountain Cemetery, his name was Horace Cleveland, became one of the 2 top landscape architects in North America. His biggest claim to fame was the park system in Minneapolis, Minnesota. This was the first landscape that he designed outside of the United States. Other things, the Community Chorale, the Yarmouth Orchestra, the Garden Club, Writers Club, Photo Club, the Art Society. At our cenotaph, mysteriously, around the Afghanistan Memorial, we had poppies bloom that weren't planted on purpose, and they're the Afghanistan poppy. So if you're thinking of anything connected to something that's a little more ethereal or divine, there's a case for you. We shared this with Mark Cullen, who is very much involved in the veteran story in Canada and the Highway of Heroes in Ontario. He was fascinated with that story. Our youth groups, 4-H, Guides, Scouts, YACRO and its achievements, and it's interesting that we have, that the YACRO organization is showing other places how to work with respect with people that have disabilities. The Kay Nickerson Center, the work that they produce, the Yarmouth Life Skills, the All Hands on Deck initiative, which has created this network of volunteers that we can call on when we need them. And they don't all live in town. These are people that live in the municipality as well. The Yarmouth Garden Club programs, the conferences and events that we host here, the Adopt a Block program that we do in the spring to help clean the area up. These are all some things that we have to celebrate, and there's a lot more, and you can create your own list. One of the things we learned, it's interesting that Trevor commented about this, but getting involved in the program was finding the right plants to put in the right places. The median along Vancouver Street has always been a problem, or had been a problem for a long time. It was planted with Rugosa roses at first, and they were pretty when they bloomed, but they tended to trap litter going up Water Street. We tried hostas after that. They don't like sun. But it was through the Communities in Bloom program we learned about maybe some other plants to try there, and I think we've hit the winners there now with these particular ones. We're looking for red, white, and blue for the Acadian Congress, though, so we're going to do some experimenting next year. Some of the other municipal initiatives that involve summer students that do cleaning up are, we have an inventory of trees that are on public property, and the year we won the national award for urban forestry, one of our judges was from the National Capital Commission in Ottawa, and when she saw a tree inventory and how it can be used and the value attached to the trees, she said, I work in Ottawa and I don't have one of those. So it was an example that we can share with other places. Looking at energy savings with LED installations of stoplights, waste separation and waste reduction strategies, a waste app on your phone, the dog park. We've done tree and soil workshops. We have a community garden where you can sign up for a plot. It's been very successful. Kids Community Garden, we had a volunteer that was involved with that, and they often sold produce at the farmer's market. I think that group is looking for a new person to take it over. We do an annual planter workshop to help citizens learn about what you can put in a planter to help decorate your area. The Lost to the Sea Legacy Project and the website associated with it. The Doug Melanson Park in Milton. That was a cost-shared initiative, and one of the ways that it's been funded, the principal way it was funded, so the town agreed that they would do the hardscaping in that situation. But a committee had to raise matching funds, and the fee or the target was $50,000. Through the Communities in Bloom program, we initiated a community asset donation program, and I'm not sure if the municipality of Yarmouth has such a thing or has a charitable foundation associated with it, but it's a way of getting free money for your municipality. So people can donate money to the park for a specific purpose, and they get a tax receipt for that through the Community Asset Donation Program. But that also applies to other things like park benches. If you want to give a bench in memory of someone, tax receipts work. The Lost at Sea Memorial I've mentioned, you've probably seen it, but that touches, I want to say, any family in Yarmouth who has a history of family members that have gone to sea. There's someone on those memorials that are connected with them. Some of the keys to success are these, and these would be the points that I'd like to leave you with if you're looking at considering this as a program for the municipality. The committee is a committee of council. In some municipalities or some areas, they have a citizens committee, that's the Communities in Bloom committee, but it doesn't have the same influence. If council's not behind it, it's not going to go, it's not going to be as successful. So in our situation, the committee is a committee of council with volunteers who apply to be on the committee on an annual basis. There is a committee budget that is built into the annual operating budget of the town, and so again, figuring out what kind of a budget, and you don't need to start big. And I think ours maybe started with, it might have been $5,000, and then it went to 10 when we got involved at the national level. It may have gone to 15. Compile a list of your community assets, and if you sat around the table or went home and said, what do we have to be proud of here in the municipality of Yarmouth, you can come up with a lot of them. I mean, you look at the Cape for Shoe project and just sit on the beach, and you don't have to go far, right? Document your successes and think of before and after projects. So if you're going to do a project, take pictures before. That's one of the things that we didn't have easy access to. I wish I had pictures of the areas along Water Street that were improved when we started applying for national awards, because all the judges see is what is there now. Unless you can show them what was there before, it doesn't have the same impact. Use the judges' feedback and planning strategies for community improvements. So you're getting feedback from judges for a very nominal fee. It's your membership fee in the Communities in Bloom organization. If you're paying a consultant to give you that same information, you would be paying substantial money for it. So, you know, for under $1,000 each year for involvement in the committee, you're getting, I would say, in excess of $10,000 in good information back. So things you can do, get involved as a volunteer, take pride and learn about the community. People are good at complaining, and I say, so if you see something you're not happy with, do something about it. So get involved, speak to a counselor, but more importantly, get involved. Adopt a garden, but it doesn't have to be your own. You notice that a lot of my planting isn't in my yard now. Make a planter, fill a planter, do something to enhance your own property. Take and share photos. Adopt a block for the municipality. It was maybe adopt a streetscape, and I know we have some wonderful volunteers that work on the road from Vancouver Street out to Cape for Shoe, and you'll see those volunteers regularly cleaning up that area. We need to kiss their feet. They are amazing because they don't quit. If you clean up an area and in a few days it's untidy again, it can be discouraging, but they haven't quit. Like I say again, instead of complaining, get involved. Think about the town of Yarmouth asset donation program, if that's a model for you. By all means, Communities in Bloom is about sharing and stealing ideas that work. So take it and use it. Offer to volunteer and in essence, get involved. So that's the essence of the program. So again, you get good feedback from the judging experience. You do have to figure out, what am I going to show the judges when they come? Who are the people that are going to take those people around? One of the things I didn't say that would also be important is make sure that your Parks and Grounds staff, your maintenance workers are involved in your committee, because a lot of the committee decisions involve them, and it doesn't help if you make a decision that affects them, but it's beyond their ability to implement. So it's really essential that they be at the table with you. So that's essentially it. A couple of quotes there at the end. Quality of life in a community is what the citizens who live there make it, and if you wait for something to do something for you, you might wait a long time, and you might not get the result you desire. If you do it for yourself, you can take pride in the result and have the quality of control within your grasp. So that's it. So thank you. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer. I know I rambled quickly, but I hope I hit the high points for you.
Thank you very much, John. Councillor Patty Durkee, you have the floor.
Thank you, David. You have the town looking wonderful. So some things that, the people who sit on your committee, are those or the town's committee, are they the volunteers that go out and help beautify things, or do you have a committee and
Not
then you find
necessarily.
volunteers?
So,
Okay.
so we have a person on our committee who kills plants, but he takes good pictures, right? So don't give him a plant to put in the ground, he knows nothing about it, right? It will die in his care, but he takes great pictures and is good at documenting things and will help, and is really the main person who puts together, so when you're preparing for judging, you send away, it's a book describing your community and trying to address the various areas in the judging categories, and it will include pictures and descriptions. So we have a person that does that. So having a writer is a good person to have. There are an awful lot of persons that volunteer in the gardens that are not involved in the committee at all. Networking with the garden club has been fabulous. We do have a garden club representative on the committee. We also have ordinary citizens who want to get involved. Initially, when Esther Dare set up the committee, and this would be a strategic piece for your council, she spoke to people that she thought might be important to include. And so she reached out to somebody from the garden club, somebody who was a writer. I got involved, and I'm not sure why she asked me to be there, but maybe it was because of the connection with schools. There are opportunities for children to be involved as well. So under normal non-COVID times, the Lost to the Sea Garden is planted with a group of school kids in the spring. So no, they don't all have to be the volunteers that are doing the work. Some people like to volunteer. The person who maintains the Lost to the Sea Garden will not sit on a committee. She'll work in the garden, and she does a wonderful job of it. But so it's a mixture, and council should go and actually select people. We'd like you, and you. Here's why. Will you do it?
So did you see this a change in the town once Communities in Bloom became involved in terms of beautification?
Absolutely. There's no question that the impact of being involved has increased community pride, but it also has impacted, I want to say it's impacted decisions of council based on good feedback, and the committee also has made recommendations to council, and we've had bylaws passed as a result. For example, we now have somebody's talking about deer. We have a feeding of wildlife bylaw in town that came through. It was initiated at the Communities in Bloom Committee. I think there's another one that I can't remember what it is right now, but the Community Asset Donation Program was initiated by Communities in Bloom Committee. So those would be examples of things that have taken action by council, where council's taken direction from the committee, or taken advice, I guess, from the committee. So it's an advisory committee to council.
Okay, and being involved in Communities in Bloom, do you have access to plants and things, or
Okay.
reductions of costs in materials?
I won't say reductions in cost. You get someone who's a member of the garden club, because they get a 10% reduction at certain suppliers. But what it's helped us do is to find better plants, better choices of plants. So at every national symposium, one of the presentations will have something to do with right plant, right place, and what's new that's coming out. A very practical workshop from a couple of years ago was one about fire risk mitigation in communities, and this was as a result of the fire in Fort McMurray. Actually, Fort McMurray was supposed to be hosting in 2020, and because of COVID, the national event didn't happen. So there's this sharing of information that's really helpful, and the judges will tell you, okay, so in our community, this is something we've done that's helped. We see a problem that you have. One of the issues that we have is in our trees along Water Street, our prevailing winds bend them, and we might say they're unsightly, and we looked at doing a lot of things, and some of them we've removed. But sometimes you use those as a way of explaining your environment and your climate, and you look at them as, instead of a liability, look at them as an asset. So it's helps you use your eyes in a different way.
Okay, and sorry, my last question, I know I have a lot, but I think it's really valuable, and I've been talking about, beautification of some of our communities for quite some time. I'm thinking of, like the strip through Dayton, business strip, et cetera.
Yeah.
How would people on the committee, if this was your committee, have ideas of how to make that look better? And then if it was that, we would invest in those materials, and then the committee and people and volunteers would look after, say if you put planters or put pots along posts, et cetera.
Okay,
Is that-
so you're kind of right on a couple of the initiatives we've had. So you'll notice now there are planters on Main Street. We have a challenge with our hanging baskets. It's something that's because of wind, fog, and finding plants that will endure the conditions that we have, that are a little different than you might find in, say, Kentville or Lunenburg. So we looked at on-ground planters, and so the planters you see on Main Street, Communities in Bloom bought the planters from our budget. We have them filled by a professional nursery each year, and then businesses sponsor a planter. So each business, they're invited to, if you want to buy a planter for the year, it's $125, and we get to use the planters year after year. And so over time, the businesses will pay for those planters. So that's kind of the kind of thing that maybe you're talking about. The trees on Stars Road was an initiative of the Communities in Bloom Committee. Stars Road is a really hostile environment. The space to plant trees isn't great, but finding trees that will tolerate that, and we're still learning. But dressing up the entrances to the town has been a challenge, because our two main highways come in at very industrial kinds of locations. We settled on the Mariner Center, and so you'll see the two dories. That was a new thing this year. So the two dories that were placed there, and filled them with plants. So those are, and that's an idea that was stolen from Pugwash, by the way. It wasn't our idea, but we had a member that saw them in Pugwash. Actually, it was our chair, Heather Hatfield. She said, "I saw these in Pugwash. Couldn't we do something like that?" Yep. Where can we get a dory? We got two, and it does dress up the area. So it's little things like that. Because we're a maritime, a coastal region, you can think about things that could dress up the area you're speaking of, that might not necessarily involve a lot of maintenance. And for your maintenance staff, low maintenance is the thing that you have to think about. So absolutely, you'll find possibilities. And trees, plant trees. We're looking at sequestering carbon, the green, creating a greener community, finding locations where you can plant trees, and getting the right tree in the right place. So, yeah. Yeah, well, hopefully that helped. Any other questions?
Deputy Warden, you have the floor.
Dave, just quickly, thank you for coming in, and excellent presentation. And I'll echo what Councillor Durkee did have to say about the Hebron-Dayton area, and we've got a number of sidewalks in that area certainly, and dressing those up. I really did like the idea of the ability to the community asset idea.
It's free money.
Because I was running, and as I often do on the sidewalk, and an elderly resident said, they'd like to see more benches. So that's a way to do that without adding additional need for additional revenue from general taxation and so forth. So no, that's excellent, and those pieces are good, and the flowers do look lovely and add quite a bit of flair to the town. So I'm hopeful that as we move forward, we'll be able to see how we can make this fit in the municipality of Yarmouth. And very, very important, because we're all hopeful that the ferry returns to
It's another
significant
conversation,
service
isn't
next
it?
year. So it's looking up, so thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I will say, so every tree and every bench in the Doug Melanson Park was paid for by somebody else. And we are now using Community Asset Donation Program to replace some of the benches that were originally purchased by Parks Department of the town, and they're being paid for as memorials, or sometimes it's to celebrate something, but it's been an excellent program. So it's a little bit of work up front to establish that charitable foundation, but I'm sure that with the staff here at the municipality, it would be something that would be not too hard to do. So there's a model for it.
All right, thank you very much, Dave.
You're
I see
welcome,
no
John.
more
I probably
questions. I
spoke-
do have one quick question in regards to some of the projects. Has the Communities in Bloom Committee done any work on invasive species? And the one
Yes,
that I'm
okay.
speaking
Actually,
about,
that's a great topic, a great question. So invasive species tends to be a topic that you will hear about at a national symposium. As there was a presentation done just last year about an invasive grass called Phragmites that originally was planted along highways in Quebec, and it likes wetlands, and so what it does is it chokes out native species, and it's become and if you have it growing in your area, it also creates a fire hazard, because when they die, it's one of those plants that fire will just blow through. And we are at risk of a lot of things from invasive species. One that we heard of at a national convention was the emerald ash borer. It's a little green beetle. It's pretty to look at. It is now in Nova Scotia. It will kill every ash tree if we don't keep an eye out for it. The city of Ottawa now has no ash trees. And
the
within
one
about
that I
5
was
years,
thinking of that just recently, and I do see evidence of it in the town, actually, close to the water plant, would be the Japanese knotweed.
knotweed, yes, yeah, and knotweed. In Britain, if you have knotweed on your property is not worth as much. It's worth paying attention to it. The sprouts apparently can be eaten. I don't have a recipe and I haven't tried it, but it's a problem. And one of the ways it gets spread is by moving earth. Snowplows will spread it, not intentionally, but if you have it grow on the side of the road, the snowplow goes by or the road grader goes by, they pick up a root of it here, they drop it there, and all of a sudden you see it growing along gravel roads where, how did that get here, right? That often is the way. I've had it come in soil that we bought for a garden, and all of a sudden you see a piece of knotweed in it. It's very difficult to eradicate.
Oh, absolutely. There's some out actually on my property that I've been having a heck of a time trying to find a sustainable way or non-poisonous way to destroy everything else to try to kill this stuff.
Cover it with black plastic and leave it for about 3 years, and then after that mow off every little sprig. If you keep at it, it'll go eventually.
Yeah.
But the roots, it's a very deep-rooted plant as well. So it's one that people will look at and say, oh, what a pretty plant, is purple loosestrife. We have it in Dayton now. It's growing in the ditches. It's another invasive species that doesn't have a natural predator, and it loves wetlands. And you wouldn't have seen it here 15 years ago.
Yep.
So anyway.
Councillor Cushion, you have one question, do you?
I just want to expand on David's comment on the Japanese knotweed. The knotweed is another reason why it's so invasive. It spreads in two ways. It spreads by seed, but it also spreads by rhizomes, which grow underneath the ground and pop up, and so it makes it that much more difficult to try to get rid of it. And as David said, once you do get it under control, as soon as it sprouts up, if you can keep it from maturing, so it won't spread. That's about the only way you can do it. But the minute you stop, it's back.
Yeah, it's a tough
bad
plant.
Yeah, it is a tough plant. Well, thank you very much, Dave.
You're welcome.
Appreciate your presentation. You brought forward a lot of ideas to council.
Yeah, I hope
And-
some of it will be useful, and if you need any other information, by all means, get in touch, or get in touch with our chair, Heather Hatfield. She'd be happy to talk to you, and she would bring a counselor's perspective as well, which would be helpful. So, okay.
Thank you very much.
You want
Appreciate
this
it.
off.
All right, moving on. There's no correspondence for action. You have 3 pieces of correspondence for information. Old business. 7.1 Flag Policy F-046-21 Draft Revisions. Madam Chair? Madam CAO?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So council, before you is the result of the work that you asked me to go back and take a look at, seeing what we can do to maybe get closer to the mark with respect to our flag policy. So Darlene and I have worked with some experts. She's going to come down here just in case you've got some questions. So it's fairly significant, the change. We've really taken the aspects of the flag policy that we were kind of wrestling with, and we've really focused them on equity-seeking groups, and you'll see that in the language in the draft that's before you. We have identified that we can install a 4th flagpole right alongside of the 3 that are already in front of the building. We've talked with some diversity experts around how to approach this equity-seeking group honoring process. That's a mouthful. So the notion is, rather than have a poll that would be for any community group, the poll is reserved for groups who are equity-seeking groups, and that it's a place of honor. And so in the draft language, Part 5 is really where you see the major changes. In the work that Darlene and I were doing, in the professionals we were working with, you know, they gave us some good advice around, you know, it's great that you want to erect a poll that's for equity-seeking groups, but because of council's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, it was also recommended that we actually take a stand and we set aside certain days that we're just automatically going to raise certain flags. And so those are included in Part 5 as a recommendation to council to adopt. And then we continue to provide space or process so that if a group wants to have a flag raising, they can absolutely do that. The draft language refers to a form for people to fill out to come before council for approval to raise flags that are not included in the ones specified as more or less automatic in the policy. We don't have that form for you. It would just be a form that would include enough information to bring before council for you to make a decision on whether or not that group would be given permission to raise their flag. So those are the major changes. So again, language is around equity-seeking groups, specifying specific days, namely Emancipation Day, African Nova Scotian flag, Pride Week, the Progress Pride flag, Transgender Awareness flag, transgender flag, African Heritage Month, African Nova Scotian flag, Day for Truth and Reconciliation, Mi'kmaq Grand Council flag, National Aboriginal Day, Mi'kmaq Grand Council flag, and Mi'kmaq History Month, Mi'kmaq Grand Council flag. So those, we would automatically raise those flags on those days. And then again, provide space for organizations to have ceremonies and to provide for the process for council's approval on requests.
I'm sorry, I don't see, I do believe it's Councillor Patty Durkee. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to say thank you so much to Darlene and our CAO for the work that has been done on this. I really like the way it's been cleaned up and tightened. And I'm sorry, but I have to point out a typo, that 5.1, you have to, it says shall be made in writing. There's an in missing.
I have it. I have
Sorry,
it. Yep.
the teacher just came out in me. We know that what we have to do is, if we approve this flag policy, that it has to be sent to council for approval. And I just want to make note that Pride Month in Canada is October, and I'm not sure if we'd have time to be able to put up a flag honoring that or not, but I just wanted to bring it to everybody's attention. So, thank you. Oh, and while I'm here, I might as well make a motion that we forward the flag policy to regular council for approval.
So motion on the floor to forward this policy, let me get the policy number right,
F-046-21.
to regular council. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Nick Hilton. All right, so the next one on the docket is Deputy Warden Trevor Cunningham.
Yes, and thank you certainly to staff for working the policy. It looks to be excellent and honors the wishes, I think, of all the folks that had input. I will say, and again, there is an opportunity to add to the list, but we do have a fairly significant Acadian population in the community, and it's just maybe moving forward, not for today, but maybe we could look at the addition of an Acadian flag raising at some point, because we do have a significant Acadian population in the in our municipalities. So maybe just put that on the radar, and perhaps staff could do a little digging into that for us. So those are my comments, and I'll be supporting the motion, obviously.
Thank you very much, Deputy Warden. Councillor Sherry Hurlbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to also echo the sentiments of the other councillors in thanking the CAO and Darlene for taking another round at this policy. It's one that's near and dear to my heart, and I like the fact that we have included, specific days where people don't have to continue to apply every year. We know those are special, we know those are important, and I apologize, but I thought that there was somewhere in the new revisions that said if there were things like Deputy Warden Cunningham mentioned, that we wouldn't have to, we could add them to the list. Is that correct? Did I read that somewhere? That that there could be an opportunity in the future to add something to the list that wouldn't have to be reapplied for every year?
That's right. So council could make a decision. So let's say, for example, an applicant comes before you to have a particular flag raised for a particular reason. Council can decide, based on your view in terms of how the community values that particular issue, or the compelling argument that might be made. And it's as simple as a motion to amend the policy and your 7 days notice. So you can absolutely do that. That's provided for.
Okay. And one more comment. I'm happy that we have 4 flagpoles. However, I guess my comment or question would be, was there any consideration or research on municipalities and them having a flag that's raised always in support of the Mi'kma'ki Grand Council flag? Was that a discussion, or?
I wouldn't say we asked that particular question. I think we found lots of examples where there are only 4 flag poles and only those 4 flags fly. I'm thinking most recently of Argyle. So when the municipality of Argyle moved to their new building, they have 4 flag poles in front of their building, and they fly the Canadian flag, the provincial flag, the Acadian flag, and the First Nation Grand Council flag. But their old flagpole at the courthouse is where they are providing for equity-seeking groups. So there's so many different combinations and permutations of how this is. There's definitely, and Darlene can add absolutely to this conversation, there's definitely an element of adjacency, which we heard, in a couple of pieces of correspondence. Adjacency to the seat of government does have an impact on the work that equity-seeking groups are doing. And so, we talked with a couple of people about, our property and what could be done. And the Director of Public Works feels confident that we can add that 4th flagpole right here at the portico.
Okay, thank you, and I would be in support of forwarding this to council as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Nick Hilton, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just a question about what they'll look like. Do we know, if they're all the same height? One or two are higher than the other 2?
So the pole that the Canadian flag flies on will be the highest. The other 3 poles will be the same height.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, is there any more discussion on the motion on the floor? I do have one point to make. Thank you very much, Councillor Durkee. Yes, the school teacher does come out of you in regards to spelling or omissions and stuff like that. That needs to be done. Every time that I seem to write something, I seem to miss something, so that's a good catch. All right, if there's no more discussion on the motion, I'd entertain the question. Question being called on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried unanimously. That will be moving forward to regular council on October the 27th. All right, moving on. Item 7.2, First Nation Land Acknowledgement. Madam CAO?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So council, before you in your package was a request for decision. You had asked us to go and do a little bit of research and take a look at what it would look like for this council to consider the adoption of a land acknowledgement. So we worked with our partners at Acadia First Nations, as well as our solicitor, to learn a little bit about what's involved in looking at doing something like that. And in the report I provided for you, there is basically five bullets that outline, what the guidelines or best practices are. So acknowledging Mi'kma'ki traditional or ancestral territory is a way of showing respect for and honoring a shared treaty relationship. An acknowledgement is not intended to create any legally binding obligations or recognition of asserted claims, but we want to be careful that language relating to Charter of Rights and our treaty interpretations are avoided. Only Mi'kma'ki individuals should welcome others to the traditional territory, and all speakers are encouraged to acknowledge Nova Scotia as Mi'kma'ki traditional or ancestral lands. So the sample acknowledgement that I have provided and recommended to you is the one that I've received from Acadia First Nation, and I've also provided in my recommendation a suggestion for how and when it should be given.
Councillor Sherry Hurlbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Madam CAO, was there any discussion, I guess I feel like every time I hear a land acknowledgement, the word unceded is there, and that, goes back to the lands not being signed over to us, or that's my interpretation of what I read and what I've been trying to learn. So was there any discussion on that being in there? Like I look at the one that I'm most familiar with at NSCC, and it says the unceded territory and ancestral homeland of the Mi'kma'ki Nation. And so I'm just wondering, was there a reason why that word or group of words wasn't included?
So there were a couple of conversations around that. The sample language that you have came to us from Acadia First Nation, and that word wasn't included. And that is actually the one word our solicitor advised us not to use.
And was there a rationale for that?
Yep, it's to do with any interpretation around the Charter rights and or treaty interpretations. So the Prime Minister doesn't use the word unceded.
And I guess that wouldn't have been unceded. I guess that was my rationale, but I'm learning every day. Okay, thank you.
Deputy Warden.
Yes, thank you to staff and for reaching out to our partners at Acadia First Nation and all of the hard work you've done to get us this point. So having said that, I'll move that the municipality district of Yarmouth accept the recommendations of the CAO and that certainly is circulated in the document today around the land acknowledgement.
So you're making a motion, Deputy Warden, to move this forward to a regular council?
Yes, yeah, just for greater clarity, absolutely.
Okay, it's a motion on the floor. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by, I see Councillor Sherry Hurlbert. Any discussion on that motion? Councillor Lauren Cushion, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I believe our staff certainly, how can I say it, worked with the local Acadian First Nations in developing such an acknowledgement that would be acceptable to us and to them. So I think there's no need for us to try to revamp put any other words in there. If they're satisfied with what we got, then that's what we should be doing. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Councillor Patty Durkee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a question, it's for confirmation purposes, that we would be reading this acknowledgement at all council, committee of the whole, regular council, and any committees of council. So, right, is that correct?
Right, and so if you adopt this, it would not necessarily include any regional collaborations.
Okay,
Just to be clear, because
Yes.
we wouldn't be able to mandate that.
right,
Yep.
right, that's, okay, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good point, because actually we had a Yarmouth International Airport Corporation, and there was a request from another funding municipal unit in regards to land acknowledgements, and I'm the chair of that, so since that was his own legal entity, I asked the board permission to start to move forward on all of our future meetings with a land acknowledgement, and that's exactly what we're going to be doing. And I was kind of hoping that this would move forward, because this is actually the one that I'm going to be using. That's in the recommendation, provided council approves it on the October 27th meeting. Actually, I'll probably be starting our meeting with that, since it's going to move forward. We'll see how it goes here from the vote here. Councillor Sherry Hurlbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I guess I would follow up on your comment, and you clarified to, I guess, it would be regional meetings that I would be, a member of, to take it upon myself to add that to future agendas for those for consideration by that regional committee. I'm assuming that's how we would proceed with that, if that was the wish of the, as a member of the committee, I would just ask that to be added to the agenda, have the discussion, and then the regional committee would decide yes or no.
From my understanding, there was a request that come from the town of Yarmouth on any regional committees that they sat on, and the letters went to the chairpersons,
Okay,
and that's how I initiated that at that time.
okay, perfect, thank you.
So it'd be up to, from my understanding, the chairperson of the regional committee to bring that request forward, because that's what it was. Councillor Lauren, question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you mentioned, Town of Yarmouth has sent us a letter to the various committees, and I do sit on chairperson of a couple of the committees that we jointly sit on, and their wording is a little bit different than ours. Since I'm the chair of these particular committees, I would use the language that we accepted, that we approved, or we wanted.
I guess that would be at the pleasure of the board or committee you're working with.
Yeah. So what I would understand is if it's a regional committee, since you got a letter from a funding municipal unit, you would bring that letter forward to the committee, and you as chairperson would say that we've had this request, this is the wording that I would like to use, and just get approval from the committee as a whole.
Yes, I understand such, but as a chair, I would rather use the one that we adopted other than the one that they requested us to consider, or it would be up to the committee to decide which one they want to use.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be
absolutely.
up to that committee. Now, I know the airport board, for example, they didn't specify the language, they just specified that it be done, and it just conformed to best practices.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you.
Councillor Patty Durkee.
Yeah, just very quickly, thank you, Mr. Chair. Did we receive a copy? Did we all receive that letter from the town requesting that we use the land acknowledgement? I just don't recall.
So
Correct me if
From
I'm
my
wrong.
understanding, it was only sent to the chairpersons of any committees that there was more than one funding member, like Yarmouth International Airport, I believe. Remo got sent one, and where I chaired both of those. I don't know if it went to every chair. It didn't come directly to this council, just come to me as the chairperson of a committee.
So for example, I was at the industrial commission meeting when that piece of correspondence to that commission was on their agenda. So
Okay.
we never received a letter for this council to that effect.
Okay, just wondering, because I didn't receive anything for doctor recruitment and retention committee or the Western Rand, so. So
Interesting.
this was new to me, that's why I'm asking.
Okay.
Something, I was wondering if it was
So what
something that I
I'll
missed.
do, after we vote on this motion, maybe, I don't
If you
believe
could
we need to put
forward
it on
that
the
to me.
agenda, is maybe I'll write a note to the town, to the town clerk and the mayor, stating that not all committees got that letter.
That would be great, thank you.
I'll
Yeah,
take that initiative upon myself.
okay, thanks.
I'll CC everyone here in council and staff as well. So there's a motion on the floor to move this land acknowledgement to a regular council for approval. Is there any more discussion? Question being called. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried unanimously. In council, I fully expect that this will be passed at our next regular council meeting on the 27th, and I'll start off that meeting with this acknowledgement before we get final approval. Thank you. Item 7.3, request to form a regional emergency management organization to Minister John Lore.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. So as you know, this council approved revisions to the emergency management bylaw in order to allow for the formation of a new REMO. So we did have an intermunicipal agreement with the town of Yarmouth, and we did emergency management in collaboration with them. But when we went to the county level, we had to approve a new bylaw, which we've done. When we submitted the bylaw to the province, we just got a note from the emergency management section that what they'd like to see is to have a letter one letter signed by each of the 3 participating municipalities requesting that the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing form REMO. So it's not enough that each of the 3 municipalities has the bylaw and submits it to the province. They would just like that one additional step, making the formal request to the minister. So, Mr. Chair, through you to council, I'm looking for a motion today for the municipality, the District of Yarmouth, to jointly write to Minister Lore with the Town of Yarmouth and Municipality of Argyle, requesting the formation of a regional emergency management organization for Yarmouth County.
Moved by Councillor Hurlbert, seconded by Councillor Patty Durkee. Is there any discussion on that motion? Question being called. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried unanimously. Just a point of clarification, Madam CEO, this is going to be moved to regular council for ratification, correct?
It would, yep.
Thank you. All right, moving on. Item number 8, 8.1, deer crossing signs. Deputy Warden Trevor Cunningham, you have to have this added to the committee of the whole agenda. You have the floor.
Right, I had a resident the last couple months approach me about the possibility of erecting some deer crossing signs, and I am aware that they do cross in almost everywhere. But having said that, they do frequent some areas more than others. But and we know that, you know, from traveling on the highways in various provinces, that they do have moose warnings, certainly. And you know, we've got them just sort of thinking, reflecting on this issue a little bit more. Lots of them are being struck by cars. It's a big issue. But having said that, you know, they could be put in various communities. Maybe not with the deer crossing necessarily, but warning people about the inherent dangers of the deer population in the area, striking them with cars and so forth. And for local residents to be reminded, but we're all aware they're there, I think mostly. But you know, we've got the ferry season coming up next year. Many of our American friends may not be aware of the frequency of the crossing of the animals, and you know, I think it may be a good idea to look at some you know, possible warnings about you know, the frequency of deer crossings and so forth, just to give people a heads up. And I mean, that could also be done through electronic media as well as physical signs. So just wanted to bring it to the council table, not for any decision at this juncture, but you know, maybe staff could take that back and ruminate on that a little bit, pardon the pun, and you know, perhaps we can put our thoughts to this and come up with something that will, I guess, maybe incrementally move the ball ahead on this. So those are my comments. Thanks.
Councillor Patty Durkee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, thank you for bringing that forward, Deputy Warden Cunningham. And I don't know if anybody can answer this, but does Department of Highways have deer crossing signs?
They do, and they have metrics that help them to decide when and where to put them up.
So I'm just wondering if it might be possible for us to, in fact, I'd make a motion to direct staff to contact Department of Highways to see if we could have a little study and erect some signs in our communities.
A little study.
Well, okay, not staff to do the study, it would be if we could contact a Department of Transportation to even just provide us with signs for those areas they feel are high need. Is that better?
All right, so there's a motion on the floor. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by the deputy warden. Before I open the floor to discussion, did you call them DOT or TIR because now they're called the Department of Public Works?
Oh, that's my
Yeah,
fault. Sorry. Department of Public Works, you're right.
All right, is there any discussion on that motion? Nope, I see Councillor Nick. All right. Question being called on that motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried unanimously. Moving on, 8.2, road naming approval, private road. You'll have that in your package.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. So our GIS technician had received a request and some material from the development officer around changing the name of a road, and it complies with the requirements of our process, and there was a majority agreement on the new name of the road. So the recommendation is before you to rename the private road in Somerville, currently known as Glover Lane, to Harris Lake Road.
Councillor Sherry Hurlbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to make a motion to recommend that this be moved to regular council for approval to approve the renaming of the private road in Somerville, currently known as Glover Lane, to Harris Lake Road.
Okay, a motion on the floor. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Deputy Warden Trevor Cunningham. Discussion. I will ask this of staff. Do they already currently have a private road sign on that road? Are we aware of?
I have no idea. No.
Okay, just asking. I thought I seen one, but I'm trying. I remember where the spot is. I'm just remembering if there was one there. Councillor Hurlbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My neck of the woods and travel that frequently, and I've never seen a sign. And when I was talking to one of the residents, they said they didn't even know when they bought the piece of land that the name of the road was actually Glover Lane. So, so I don't think there's a sign. I could be mistaken, but.
I could be mistaken as well. All right, there's a motion on the floor. Any discussion on that? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Item 8.3, application of policy R-002-03.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So unfortunately, Council, we've had a piece of property that's experienced some damage due to fire. So in your package is a recommendation from the Director of Finance to reduce the taxes by $261.88 on assessment account number 03496287 as a result of fire in compliance with policy R-002-03.
Deputy Warden Trevor Cunningham.
So I'll move that the Municipality District of Yarmouth forward the tax reduction on property AAN number 03496287 under the policy R-00203 for approval is circulated.
All right, a motion on the floor. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Patty Durkee. Any discussion on that motion? Question being called. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Moving on, we have 4 agenda additions, so we'll move on to item 8.4, blue-green algae. Councillor Patty Durkee, you had asked to have that added to the agenda, so the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is extremely unfortunate to hear the news that Brazil Lake now has blue-green algae bloom, because once that happens, we do not know how long that's going to last. And I know all the homeowners or property owners there are upset that that's happening. Being a frequent visitor to Brazil Lake, because a friend of mine owns property there, what I've noticed over time is some people are continuing to remediate their land right down to the lake. And it's a problem. And I'm not sure what we do about it, but it is taking a big effect on our communities. And Darlings Lake, again, watching the development in there and seeing this happens. So through the chair to our CAO, I know we have a bylaw, but we have no teeth to it. So there's no consequences. And my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that the environment doesn't do anything until there's a problem. And I'm not sure where we go from here with this, but this is the last thing we want to start happening in our communities, as our lakes get blue-green algae. And I know sometimes it's caused naturally when the water's heated, but in these situations, I know that people are not taking the proper care of their properties in order to prevent that from happening. So I think we need to have further discussion on that to figure out what we can do. Another piece that would add to that is, and again, I'm not familiar with this, but maybe someone can help me, but when families have like 5 to 7 trailers on, permanent trailers on their properties, what happens to the sewage that's coming from those trailers? And maybe someone can help me with that, because I don't know the answer. If they're required to take it out, if it's being buried, or if they have a treatment going on or putting it in the right place. But I think that's an area of concern that needs to be addressed, and soon.
So, Mr. Chair, I can try to help a little bit. So the riparian buffer issue is a significant issue. As you know, our municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw supports best practices in disturbing as little vegetation as possible around waterways when we're developing property, and that is for those ecological reasons, to maintain clean water. And we know that things happen before we even see property owners for building permits or development permits sometimes, because a development permit is not required to do groundwork. We are in the engagement phase, early engagement phase, with the review of our municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw. And the development officer and myself have had significant conversations with the consultants about this riparian buffer challenge we're experiencing. We're not alone. There are some interesting approaches and models. But you're quite right, Councillor Durkee. At the end of the day, if it's important enough to this council, we are likely going to have to consider some fairly significant enforcement tools down the road. And so as the consultants receive their feedback from the engagement, they'll be coming to the Planning Advisory Committee, who is the steering committee on the work, and they'll be talking about options around the riparian buffer issue. I won't be surprised, the surveys are open now for Plan Modi, and I won't be surprised if the riparian buffer issue comes up several times through the feedback on the planmodi.ca website. On the other question you had around multiple trailers, I would have to do some research, but I know that if a property is going to have a septic on it, it would have to be engineered, and it would have to meet the standards required for the inputs. If the trailers are there are technologies available like honey wagons where they could be doing things properly. They could be. The challenge we run into is that there's no building permit required to clear some land and park a trailer on it. You're right, there are some challenges and nuances there.
I certainly remember the trailer issue about the municipality district of Yarmouth went through that 10 years ago in regards to how many trailers and stuff, and there was a lot of people upset. And I do know that it's in regards to limiting the municipality district of Yarmouth, limiting at that time back in our old municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw, which we're currently using. I remember that specifically. This room was full. It was full. In regards to, I'm going to comment before I turn the floor back over to the next people in line. I know this has been a problem. A riparian buffer, even though it's more like a suggestion with no teeth. We're going to be meeting here in the coming month or two with different ministers, the new ministers of environment, municipal government affairs, John Lohr, in that regards. And maybe that's something that we can bring to their attention. Also, if you all remember that we're going to be moving forward with strategizing and contacting the new government officials. So that's something that actually we could also focus on as well, something that seems to be a big issue, because blue-green algae has been in my area since I started as a councillor, and thankfully it's improving, it's not gone away, but I really hate to hear, and I know exactly what you're talking about, Councillor Durkee, in regards to it showing up in new areas. There's a lot of different factors, but just to show up, it's not good. Deputy Ward?
Right, and the information I've been, this is, again, to Warden Cunningham's point, we've been hearing about and dealing with the blue-green algae issue for quite some time, and it's a very serious issue, and very toxic, and you know, certainly degrades the quality of life for people that have properties or use lakes in the area. So, I mean, we may want to look at doing some additional public education in the sense that, as I understand it, part of the problem is, or part of our scenario, it's not necessarily part of the problem, but our lakes are into the province very, generally speaking, very nutrient poor. The lakes are very nutrient poor, and any additional introduction of any nitrogen or phosphorus compounds into the water system causes these algal blooms, and they are nasty, and they do not clear from the lakes quickly because they're inland and they're slow moving, and the nutrients just cycle through year over year. So once you've got the problem, oftentimes it does not go away quickly. It could be decades, or I'm not sure what the researchers understand about it, but it's a serious problem. So you probably got to have an additional nutrient load coming from somewhere, and you've got to also the fact that people clear to the water's edge and don't necessarily leave a riparian buffer aggravates the situation further. And so you know, it's kind of like a community stewardship piece. If this is going on, and if people, and I don't know, if, I mean, it's not the trailers per se that would be the issue. It would be if somebody were letting the sewage, you know, go on the ground, and it was eventually finding its way, the nutrients to the lake. So I'm not sure if that's going on or not. But long story short is, I think Warden Cunningham's idea is good to certainly speak with some of the ministers responsible and try to problem solve this thing. But in the interim, perhaps staff could go back and look at the issue in terms of maybe educating people, you know, certainly in our whole municipality about the dangers of it, because I don't think people understand. I mean, you clear to the lake, it's kind of nice in some respects, so, you know, you've got access to the lake, but the harm it does is not necessarily well understood until it's too late, and it's not easily fixable. I mean, we may even want to try to undertake, you know, a reintroduction of some riparian buffer areas where it has been cleared to the lake. So maybe people can plant trees, or let, you know, the natural flora kind of go back. But anyway, those are all things that we may look at. But I think we need to let people know, like, once we've got this problem in the lake, we've got the problem, and people that own property on the lakes will suffer, and I think the communities will suffer generally because of it. So those are my comments. Thanks.
Councillor Patty Durkee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know this has been a topic in the past, and we've worked with our development officer to provide documentation, and TREPA has been involved to development. I understand, thankfully, that we are looking at our land use bylaw and municipal planning strategy, but we have a problem in the interim. So I think contact with the environment is something that we should be looking into, as Warden Cunningham has suggested, and have that discussion to say, you know, you can't just wait until the last minute. You have to do something prior, you know, until this happens. Education is really important, and I'm wondering if it would be time possibly to do another piece, maybe through media, to bring that to a head again. If we could, that would be helpful. The other comment that I wanted to make is that I guess it's our responsibility as a municipality to ensure that people are following the bylaws, and I know that we do, and I know it's really hard for our staff to get out there. We have so many lakes, which makes living in the municipality of the District of Yarmouth so attractive. Let's face it, you know, we're so lucky. You can be at a lake in 10 minutes from town. So it's the last thing that we want, is for land values to go back because our citizens aren't taking good care of their or the appropriate care of their property. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, one thing, I know exactly what area you're talking about. There is a group on Facebook, and I had referred the group to contact TREPA, who's had a lot of experience with this, and we'll see where that goes, whether it's education or if it's the community forming their own group. But as the CEO had mentioned, we're going through our municipal planning strategy and land use bylaws again, and blue-green algae certainly on my front out in front of me with my eyes, certainly on it. That's been an issue in the municipality district of Yarmouth in different areas as long as I can remember, and I'm saddened to hear that it's going into places where it's never been seen before. So we'll make note of that. As soon as we can get some confirmation with meeting with different ministers and stuff, we'll certainly, and hopefully they'll come down here and visit us. Just make sure to keep that on your radar, because we need to work together with different levels of government to help with this problem. Councillor Lauren, question.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. We talk about the blue-green algae here. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Halifax has experienced this blue-green algae in some of their lakes up in that area, and it talked about one of the pets. A dog was in the water and died because of the poisoning of it, right? So I wonder if it'd be interesting to reach out to them too, see if their staff has come up with any type of solution to the problems that they're having. I know it's a very difficult problem to fix. I talked to some of the members of TREPA years ago on a property, and I mentioned about lime, adding lime to it, but they said the lime is not the problem. The problem is the warm weather and the nutrients that are coming in the water. So it is a problem, and like I say, I think Halifax has started to have that problem too. So it might be interesting just to touch base with them to see if they have moved forward quicker than we are and whatnot on finding a solution for this. Thank you.
Excuse me.
Councillor Nick Hilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, this question is for the CAO, because I feel like this is going to be a big ask. It's something that's gone on for 10 years or 15 years now. And it's a possibility in any of our lakes. I have property on a lake, and it's one of the most enjoyable things that I do. So is this something that staff can handle, or is this something that we should be reaching out on a bigger scale? Like, I know we just had the Western Wren, thank you, do work on lobster stocks. Is this something that they should be looking at as an entire?
So we have a relationship, Councillor Hilton, we have a relationship with some individuals at the Department of Environment locally who we can talk with about this, because when the algae are discovered, they're reported to the Department of Environment in the in the local area where it's observed. And so what I can do is reach out to those people that Derek Sutherland and myself work with, and we can see, what they know about the blue-green algae in this particular case, where it's coming from. Has it been in Brazil Lake before? If so, how long, when, I don't know. You're quite right. It's a big issue, and it can, as the deputy warden said, it can naturally occur. I mean, there is satellite imagery of water bodies in areas where there's no humans at all, and algae forms. So it's hard to pinpoint the cause. But as Councillor Durkee said, there are things we can do at least to not make matters worse. So respecting riparian buffers and making sure septic systems are properly functioning and that they meet the design approvals and things like that. So I can start locally and ask a few questions, and I think the warden is right. Based on what I've heard from the consultants who are helping us with our NPS, Nova Scotia has so many bodies of water, and it's not unusual to hear and see advisories in HRM about specific lakes throughout the summer that are closed because of algae blooms. So, raising it with your colleagues at the provincial level is not necessarily too micro in nature. It's a provincial issue, especially if we're going to try and reach some population targets like 2 million. Clean water will be one of the big things people will want, so.
Thank you.
Right. Okay, moving on. Make sure my microphone's on. Item 8.5, agenda document. Councillor Patty Durkee, you had asked to have that on the agenda. The
I
floor
did,
is
thank you,
yours.
Mr. Chair. Until now, we always get the documents, we, as in council, gets the documents prior to a meeting. We get them on Friday. But I would like to suggest, and I think I'll make a motion that, and we can discuss this, that the documents go live to the public when they come live to us, because I think it's really important to allow the public an opportunity to see what information is coming out on our agenda, so that they can be prepared to when they watch meetings or in advance as well, so they have an understanding of the direction where we're going prior to meetings. So if questions arise, they can formulate those questions and see. I'll shorten that. So I'd like to make a motion to make the agenda documents live to the public when they are put on for council.
Okay, a motion on the floor. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Nick Hilton. Any discussion on that? I got a few problems with that suggestion. First of all, sometimes the documents that we receive are draft and they're updated. And what I don't like, say for example, if one of the agenda items here was put before us, like in regards to the road naming, private road. We'll just use that one as an example. And it's a very simple one. If that information is out to the public, and then someone might get if there's a spelling error or a correction, I don't know, I'm not comfortable with that yet. It's up to council to disseminate the information and move forward. And as you all know, sometimes documents are not ready at the time when the agenda is put forward on the website. So someone might see like deer crossing signs and there's nothing there. Because the deputy warden wanted to talk about the deer crossing signs, and we all discussed that. We come to a consensus on what we're going to be doing with that. And someone might ask, well, where's the documents there? Well, there's not documents for everything. Land acknowledgement. There was suggestions in there that's put forward by staff, and council ultimately decided that we're going to move forward with the suggestion on there. Now, that doesn't mean that council could at the time decided something different. It's up to council to make the decisions in that regards. They do get the documents once they go live, because once they're live and the meeting is started, the documents are the documents. I'm not too comfortable with that suggestion. I don't know who's on the floor. Councillor Nick Hilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm in support of this for several reasons. I mean, spelling errors can make it to council on any day. Council is here to support our residents. I find I get multiple questions before meetings of what topics and agenda items are. And then I get multiple responses after the meeting, after we've discussed it. It is better to inform our residents prior to a meeting so that they can give us the most material possible to move things forward in a way that represents what they want the most. I might make the decision, but I make the decision with their input, because that's who I'm here to represent. So we voted down a calendar previously that would help advise them of when meetings are. And now we're making it more difficult for them to know what we're talking about going into a meeting. So I am for this. I think it speaks to transparency, and I support the motion 100%.
Deputy Ward.
Right, on the face of it, it does sound like a good idea. Having said that, it is likely very problematic, and it's problematic making, in my view, making motions quickly about procedural issues that, you know, folks need time to think about. But having said that, I won't be in favor of the motion, simply because, yes, more information is generally better, but the overarching duty of a council is to debate issues amongst councillors and come up with a decision. And really, without a motion on the floor, that's very hard to debate. So I fear this would lead to individual councillors debating the issues like residents were councillors before the council meeting, right? So it can add a lot of confusion. It would have some obvious benefits. People would see the agenda before, but ultimately it's for council to make a motion, your councillor to make a motion. It's not to say that you know, somebody sees an agenda item and they call you up and say, I want to know more about the agenda item. I mean, I think you're free to certainly tell them more about the agenda item and have that conversation with them individually. But for that reason and that reason alone, I won't be voting for the motion. And again, adding, I just think it's poor governance to be adding so many agenda items. I have to say this at the beginning of a meeting. We're doing that lots, and I think people are unprepared necessarily to talk about important issues when these agenda items are added, and the thoughtfulness. Even me now, I mean, you know, I haven't thought about this very deeply. So I guess, you know, because I haven't thought about it very deeply, that's another reason I'd be voting against it. So what I will do is I'll move to table this to a subsequent meeting of council, the next meeting of council.
All right. There's a motion on the floor to table this to the next subsequent committee of the whole. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Lauren Cushing. So, Madam CEO, point of process here.
Yep, so the motion to lay on the table to the next committee, the whole meeting, takes precedent over the original motion, and the motion to lay on the table is not debatable. Mr. Chair, you call for the question.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I thought, just making sure. All right. No, because the motion was moved and seconded to lay it on the table until the next regular committee of the whole. So that motion's on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded? Motion of 4-2. I do believe that's right. Motion is carried. So going back, point of order to the original motion, that motion is now laying on the table for the next committee of the whole meeting.
Right, so it will
So,
appear
so
in,
debate will stop on that meeting.
for now, yep, and it
Yes.
will appear on the committee of the whole agenda as old business in November.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on, item 8.6, diversity and inclusion. Councillor Sherry Hurlbert, you had asked to have that on the agenda. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to Deputy Warden's comment about being prepared, and I think that for me, there are things that I think we think about in, you know, in a timely manner, yes, and there are things that, you know, pop into my head and I think, oh, this would be, you know, I think that this is, you know, a value. When I looked at the agenda and it didn't seem overly long. It's 4 o'clock. The last time we were here for 5.5 hours, and, you know, that seemed to be okay. I think for me, having the discussion at Committee of the Whole is why we're here. And, you know, we can have things added and taken away as, you know, as we see fit, but I think it is, you know, it is our right. And, you know, the reason we have Committee of the Whole is to have those discussions. So I've asked to have diversity and inclusion added, and I can make the motion and we can decide from there how we're going to proceed with this one. But I'd like to make a motion to recommend to regular council that there be a formation of a diversity and inclusion advisory committee. Our strategic priorities do include diversity and inclusion, and I know that staff are working on policies, and for me, the flag policy was a prime example of something that we asked for. We went into, you know, staff came back with something and then reached out to members of our community that we needed the input from. And so I think kind of circumventing all of that and preventing the, you know, some of the things that we have to move forward with diversity and inclusion, if we had an advisory committee, you know, established, that would make it easier for us to move forward with some of these things and hear from the groups and have representation on the committee from groups that we need to hear from, and not, you know, not target here and there. You know, we have a broad, you know, a vast variety of people on the committee. So my motion would be to recommend to regular council that that council approve the creation of a diversity and inclusion advisory committee.
Okay, a motion on the floor. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Patty Durkee. Is there any discussion on the motion on the floor? Deputy Warden.
Well, and again, I mean, the motion I don't think is a bad motion, but it's just, I mean, I don't really know what I'm voting for in a sense, because I don't know how it's how the committee would be constituted. Don't know if it's council, community members. I mean, I think generally speaking, this would be something that we'd ask maybe staff to go back and do some work around to know what we're actually voting for. It's I mean, on the face of it, it's excellent. I don't have any disagreement with it. It's just devoid of any detail, and again, I'll have to say, I just think this is poor governance to be bringing things to the table and making a motion without the necessary due diligence, and staff hasn't had an opportunity to do any work on council's behalf to move the issue forward. So, I mean, maybe the mover and seconder have thought about this more than I have, and don't think it's a bad idea. I think it's in keeping with our aim to you know, work on the diversity inclusion issues within our municipality, and I think those are all positive things. But I think rushing and making motions, you know, I'll say willy-nilly, is not a good way forward. So, but I mean, I'll vote in favor of the motion this time around, because I think generally it's okay. But I'm not just certain what it is, you know, what the committee's composed of, and so we're asking staff to come back in 2 weeks with.
We're asking council to approve, to move to regular council, the approval of, and then from there, we continue to work on what that looks like. And maybe in the past, council has done this differently, and I don't understand the process of forming the advisory committee, but I'm the chair of the accessibility advisory committee, and there were, you know, the cart was before the horse in that case, and then we went out and we did what we needed to do. So if there's a different process in place, there's discussion at committee of the whole to make sure we have those discussions. And I don't know what the proper procedures are, but I guess that's what I thought we were here for, committee of the whole, is to have those discussions.
Next one on the docket, we count. I thought I turned your mic on. I guess I didn't. Councillor Patty Durkee.
Me, thank you, Mr. Chair. I feel that items for discussion are to be put on the agenda, and sometimes they come as a result of looking at the agenda that we have or things that happen in the community. And so there are questions that residents have, and that's why sometimes there is, at the beginning, any additions or deletions to the agenda. So why, sorry, but I guess my comment is, why do we even have that if we can't add the things that we need to discuss? And that's what Committee of the Whole is for, is to bring up, you make your motion, you discuss your motion, either you send it on to regular council or you don't. So I think what we're doing is appropriate to bring up important things that councillors would like to bring to the attention of the rest of council.
Councillor Lauren Cushing. I don't know how to, could I ask the Deputy Warden and Councillor Nick Hilton? I don't know who's on.
I am there.
you
Oh,
go.
there we go. Thank you, Mr. Warden. Sorry about pushing that freaking button. Listen, there's no doubt in my mind that diversity and inclusion is an important aspect of everything. But again, I like to see our staff come back with some suggestions at the next committee of the whole on how we could formulate this committee and whatnot, and whether it should be 1, 2, 3 councillors, or should it be 1 councillor and some individuals from the public, or it is a good thing, and I don't really have enough information on how to proceed with this. Are we going to tie up our next regular council meeting with a whole gamut of wording, of how we're going to structure it, or how we're going to do things? How many meetings do we have? Once a month, once every 2 months, or whatever the case. I'd rather have some background information first, presented at our next committee of the whole, and then we can go from there. That's my opinion.
Councillor Nick Hilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think we need some clarity on process, because I'm confused, because the motion reads to create or approve the creation of. So by doing this, does that not mean that it would go back to staff? You would come back with us to what that would look like? Is that not, because I feel like that's what Sherry's asking for, and that's the first question.
So before I answer your question, Councillor Hilton, I just want to provide clarity to Councillor Hurlbert's question about what would be different between the way the Accessibility Advisory Committee was struck and this idea. The Accessibility Advisory Committee, we were required to by legislation, so that's why that was a little bit different, and then we developed our terms of reference after, because the legislation said we had to have one. If you think back to your strategic plan and our goals around diversity and inclusion, and in what we've got approved for our work plan in year 1, it talks about defining diversity and inclusion and figuring out how we're going to approach this work. So, I'm hearing council agreeing that this has to come from the ground up, right? It has to be part of a community roots initiative, this work that we're doing. So with respect, maybe what I think would speak to everything I'm hearing is that program call for the creation of the advisory committee. And that really would maybe only require a simple amendment and maybe a friendly amendment, that the diversity and inclusion program being developed by staff include a diversity and inclusion advisory committee. Maybe that's, if I'm hearing you correctly, I'm not sure.
Okay, is there going to be a friendly amendment as the mover and seconder in that regards? Okay with the seconder?
I guess that's how I envisioned it anyways, being part of the total package, so happy that that was made. And just further process clarity, we keep saying that, you know, late additions to the agenda make it hard to make decisions, but if I would have added diversity and inclusion a week ago with no context, how is that any different than adding it to the agenda today? I guess that's a question through you to the Deputy Warden.
Deputy Warden?
Well, I think the difference is if, and usually we don't have agenda items, I mean, other than if it's like a, you know, a relatively simple issue like a deer crossing sign or something like that, that wouldn't have an attached doc. But that would at least give somebody the time to do their due diligence, each individual counselor, and say, what's this item about? You know, what are some of the issues around it? And, you know, we had a motion brought to the floor that really, if we'd have voted on without the input of the CAO, would have just, it didn't make any, it wasn't clear, right? So, you know, it makes sense now, certainly, and I'm in favor of it now, but, you know, without some preparation and thought, I mean, as it was originally worded, it was just to have a committee in 2 weeks' time, essentially, right? Like, we're going to vote on yes or no. So, again, I think there's nothing wrong with adding items, but I think each counselor needs to judge for themselves whether or not, you know, this is going to surprise people, whether they've given their fellow counselor time to consider the issue, what the motion's going to be, and if that's going to be clear to everybody else. So in this case, I mean, clearly the motion wasn't clear to everybody else. We've had lots of questions, and it doesn't make for, I mean, we got there, but only after a lot of conversation and confusion and all the rest of it. So, again, I think, you know, if and again, I mean, I agree with Councillor Durkee. The items there on the agenda we can add, you know, but at the same time there are issues with adding agenda items without, you know, being fully prepared. That's why, you know, sometime before the meetings take place, we're all asked to read the agenda, read the documents, and come prepared. So, you know, throwing things on the agenda, you know, if it's a small item or if it's an urgent item, yeah, but I mean, and this is my own judgment, and other councils are free to do what they wish, but just know that, you know, sometimes other councillors don't like to be surprised with a whole bunch of issues that they're not necessarily prepared to talk about, and they typically end up with unclear motions, and that can lead to bad decision-making and bad governance, so I'll say that.
So further to that question, it's committee of the whole. This is where we do our work. If we never put items that are on, if we never put our input into items like diversity and inclusion, we send staff to make a policy. That policy doesn't reflect what the councillors' wishes are. So at what point do we have serious discussion about what we want to see in a policy? Because then we end up with policies that we end up sending back for further work because they don't reflect the wants of members of council. I give Sherry credit for stepping up and putting something, or Councillor Herbert credit for stepping up and putting something that meant something to our community, and has definitely come out of the conversations we've had about other policies, and the importance of having stakeholders' input. So I'm lost at when we can have our say about certain items.
Deputy Warden, this is your third time to speak. Is it consensus of council to allow him to go a third time? Yep. Oh, sorry, Councillor Lauren Cushion. You have the mic first, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Again, if the time before we have our committee of the whole and all of a sudden something pops in my mind and say, gee whiz, I want to put that on the agenda, so I'm going to add something to it. And if some of the other councilors are not aware or don't have the background on that to really make a conscious decision to say yes or no on it, then it becomes problematic. However, if something comes to your mind that you wanted at the committee of the whole, let our CAO know, or we can even announce it at the committee of the whole. At our next committee of the whole, can we have this item added to our agenda? I think that would be a proper way, because we had 1, 2, 3, 4 different things coming up there. You know, I never had enough information to make some good, honest opinions. The blue-green algae thing, I haven't heard about the absence of the warden yet, but we need information in order to make good decisions. And I don't think it's right to come up with a whole list of additions to the agenda. If it's a minor thing, sure. Diversity and inclusion is not a minor thing. It's a very important subject that should be discussed at a committee of the whole in preparation, so that I will have some information that I can debate honestly at our next committee of the whole.
I will make one point before I open up the floor to the Deputy Warden. You all remember too, I ask if there's any additions or deletions to the agenda. When those additions are asked for, you can certainly vote them down. Just a point of order about that. Deputy Warden.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, Mr. Warden. So I've got really no further comment. The process is a process, and you know, everybody's got the ability to speak their mind, add agendas, and we didn't vote any of those agenda items down. But again, I mean, to Councillor Cushing's point, it's better to be more prepared and have more information. I mean, those agenda items could mean anything, and you know, I like to do my due diligence before I come to a meeting. So again, you know, the rules of order are the rules of order, and certainly live by them. So thank you.
Thank you for that. I think discussion is very important, and I also think some of the best discussion is done in regards to a motion put on the floor. And there was a friendly amendment made to this motion that the strategic priorities. What was the motion that's on the floor now? Because there was a friendly amendment made to it in regards to that the committee include or recommendation include.
So the motion as I heard it was to recommend a regular council to direct staff to look at how to form diversity and inclusion, and should that include a diversity and inclusion advisory committee.
But there was a friendly amendment made in regards to the recommendation would come from the diversity. Madam CEO?
So what I think my direction is going to be is that included in the development of our diversity and inclusion program will be a diversity and inclusion advisory committee. That's what I think my direction is going to be.
Okay, so is everyone clear on the motion that we had the friendly amendment to? That's not quite follows parliamentary procedure, but I certainly allow that because rather than motions being put out and then defeated, you're not really supposed to put the same motion on the floor. So I much prefer doing the friendly amendment if possible. So is there any more discussion on the motion on the floor? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded, motion carried unanimously. Item 8.7, absence of the warden. This is going to be quick. On October 27th, 2021, I will not be present at the regular scheduled council meeting. So Deputy Warden, you will be taking the chair at that time. This is due to, typically every year I schedule out this part of the week where it's the first week of rifle season for deer. So I'm not going out of the country. I'm going to be close, but this is when I go away. And it just thought it was prudent that council know that I will not be here. No. All right, that's the last of the new business items. Next business item is in camera, so I need a motion to go into camera. Moved by Councillor Nick Hilton, seconded by Councillor Lauren Cushion. Motion on the floor to move into camera. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded, motion carried unanimously.